Welcome to Simple GIS software video tutorial. Today we'll be demonstrating using the US Census Data Wizard that's included in Simple GIS Client version 9. So to begin, I've opened a project here that I'd already created in Simple GIS, and as you can see, this project's actually a detailed street map project I created. And I actually created this using the OpenStreetMap data wizard included in Simple GIS version 9. And I'll cover that in another tutorial regarding how you can create your own detailed street map projects using this OpenStreetMap data wizard. And basically this wizard combines data from the US Census Bureau as well as OpenStreetMap to create detailed map project files. So in this case, let's assume that I wanted to see the percentage of student population that was enrolled in private school versus the percentage of student population enrolled in public school. In particular, this would be students enrolled from nursery through 8th grade for a particular county, or in this case it would be parish, since I'm dealing in Louisiana. And essentially, parishes are the equivalent of county boundaries in other states. So, as you see, I have my project pulled up. So to begin, I'm simply going to go to my menus along the top row of my Map Data View document. And in particular, I'm going to locate the menu at the very end called US Census Data. As I click on this menu, I have a couple of options that I'm presented with. So the first option I see is the US Census Wizard. And so I'll go ahead and select this option. As I do, you'll see a new dialog box appear. And one of the first things that I want to bring your attention to in this new dialog box is this US Census Bureau Key. The U.S. Census Bureau provides their data free of charge, but they do request users to obtain a key from them. And it's a very simple process and it's freely available, but they do ask users to obtain this key if they're going to use the API service to pull information from the U.S. Census Bureau. So if this is empty and you don't have a key already populated, it's very simple to get one. You can simply go and click the link next to it called Get Key. It will bring you to the US Census Bureau's website where you can simply request a key from them. And basically all you have to do is type in your name and your organization's name and an email address, which will be the email address where they'll mail the new key to you. This usually is very quick to obtain. As soon as you type in this information, select that you agree to the terms of service and click the Submit Key Request. Within just a minute or so, you should be receiving an email in your inbox with a new key in that email. Simply copy that key out of your email and paste here for the US Census Bureau key. And as soon as you execute your first query through this, Simple GIS will remember this key so you won't have to enter it again in the future. So in this case, the first thing we want to do is select our state of interest of where we're wanting to pull this data from. So in this case, we'll go ahead and we'll select Louisiana. And then we need to determine the level of detail of information we want. Do we want it at a statewide level? So if we were compiling data on a state-by-state basis, or we could select to receive data at a county level, or even down to an individual census block group level. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to select by county. And as I click this, you'll notice that Simple GIS goes ahead and it fills in all of the known counties for the selected state. Next, I need to select the topic for the information that I'm interested in. So as you see here, there's a pretty lengthy list of different statistics and topics available. which is all pulled from the US Census American Community Survey, the 5-year data. So in this particular case, we're interested in educational statistics. And as I select a topic, you'll notice that the subgrouping in the table next to this topic list does change based upon my selection. And in this case, I see all of the different types of subgroup of information that I can pull around education statistics. There's quite an extensive list here as you scroll through. All types of different types of information that you can actually pull from the Census Bureau. In our case, I'm interested in this sex by school enrollment, by level of school, by type of school for the population 3 years and over. So since we're interested in looking at student population from a private and public school, I'll select this subgrouping. And as I do, I see that the list of available fields changes in the table below. And these are the list of actual data fields that I can pull from the US Census Bureau. So here I need to go and I actually need to select the fields that I specifically want to pull. As I look at all this, so I can see they give the total male enrollment, and then I see if some other text is kind of chopped off here in my label. So if I'm not seeing the full description and I need to see it, I can simply click in the little divider between the column headers and drag until I see the full description in view. So now in this case, I see this first field here that I'm interested in. It's males enrolled in school, enrolled in nursery school. And this is the total male students enrolled in nursery school. And I do need to know the total enrollment population, which I'll explain a little later. So this is definitely a field we're interested in. So while it's selected, we'll simply click on this button with the double arrows pointing to the right, and I see that it adds that field name in my selected fields list box. So these selected fields are the fields that we're telling that we actually want to pull from the US Census Bureau for each county in Louisiana. So as I continue to go through my list, so that's the total male enrollment. The next one I see is male enrolled in nursery school, and then it has public school. So this would be all the male students enrolled in nursery school and public schools. So this is definitely a field I'm interested in. So I select it and again click the double arrows to add it to my selected fields list. And I just keep going down the list. So the next field I see that I need is males enrolled in private school, nursery school. So I'll select that as well. And so I keep working my way down the list, and now I see the next category is kindergarten enrollment, kindergarten public school, kindergarten private school, and now I see the next category is in grades for grades 1 through 4. So let me go ahead and select this one as well. And then I have the same thing, grades 1 through 4 for public school enrollment, and 1 through 4 for private school. And then finally I get to enrollment for grades 5 to grade 8. And then I get it broken down by public and private school. So that was all of the male students. So as I continue to go through the list, now I need to grab the female student enrollment. So as I continue to scroll, I finally find the female student enrollments further down the list. So I select those fields and add them as well to my selected fields. grades 1 through 4. And finally, I get to female enrollment in grades 5 through 8. So I now have all of my fields of interest added to my selected fields list box. And so at this point in time, I can simply go and click apply, and then it's going to ask me to select the shapefile to create. So in this case, I already had a shapefile that I created previously around this tutorial. So I'm just going to select it again, but I can navigate to where any other folder where I want to create this shapefile. Click Save. In this case, since this shapefile already exists, it's just prompting me whether I want to replace it. So I will say yes. And then I notice that it's processing down at the bottom of the dialog box. It'll take a minute or so to process this information. It normally doesn't take too long, but in the meantime, I'll go ahead and I'll just kind of pause the video right here until this process has finished. So once it is processing, you'll get a confirmation box that pop up just asking you if you wish to add the new shapefile to your current view. I'll select yes, and as the dialog box is dismissed, I see that it did in fact add a new layer to my table of contents in my map data view document. And if I turn this layer on, I see all of the parishes appear. And then I can actually use the View Feature Data tool and click on a parish and see all of the data. So I have the standard information regarding the parish, like the name and some other properties. Plus I have all of the fields that were added from the US Census query that I performed. And as you can see, the data in these fields are the raw population data. So for instance, this first field tells me that for the parish I selected, there are 244 male students enrolled in nursery school total. Then in the field below, I see that there are, of those 244 students, 241 of them are enrolled in a nursery school that is considered public, and 3 of those are enrolled in a nursery school that is considered private. So the 241 plus the 3 make up the total 244 male students enrolled in nursery school. So at this point, like I said, I have the raw population data here, but this still doesn't give me what I need in terms of telling me, for one, the percentage of students enrolled out of all the students enrolled, plus it's in all these separate categories. So for instance, I have a field for nursery school enrollment, a field for pre-KK, and likewise so on. So what I need to do is I need to do some further processing on this layer, and I'm going to do it by selecting the geoprocessing menu, and then I'm going to select Summarize layer. So what I want to do, I want to summarize the data in this layer, and I'm not wanting to aggregate the data by multiple counties. So what I'm going to do, essentially I'm going to summarize by the parish name. So essentially I want to keep all of my parishes. I don't want to aggregate multiple parishes together, so I'm going to use the name of the parish to summarize by. So I'll select that from the drop-down list. And then I need to give an output for the new shapefile that will be created. So I'm going to click on the Open Folder button, and I see this is the layer that we had just created and we're actually viewing and summarizing right now. So I'm going to add a new file name, and I'll just call this one Louisiana School Enroll. I'll put summary at the end. So this will be the summarization of our initial data extract. So I see all of the available fields I have that I can perform operations on. So remember when we were going through the US Census Data Wizard, I said it would be a good idea to make note of the field names and what those field names represent. And this was the reason for it. Because obviously I need to know what these fields, what data they contain in order to know how to operate on that data. So right now I know, for instance, the first field I have selected here is the male students enrolled in nursery school. So I'm going to move down, and then I'm going to select the total male students enrolled in pre-K and K. So I'm simply going to scroll down the list, and I'll do a control click on the next field in the list. So that would be this field here, which represents the males students enrolled in pre-K and K. So that's the total enrollment combined, both public and private. And I'll continue to move down my list, selecting the other categories. So I know this field is the enrollment for first through fourth grade, and likewise as I move down, I know this is the enrollment for 5th through 8th grade. And so that takes care of the male enrollment. But again, I want to combine all of this into a single field. So I'll continue down the list, and now I'll select the female students enrolled in nursery school. Then I'll select the female students enrolled in pre-KK. And likewise, I'll continue to move down and select. So this is for grades 1 through 4. And finally, I'll move down and select for grades 5 through 8. So I have all my fields selected. So I'm going to go to my field operators drop-down list. And what I want to do is I want to sum all of these fields together into a new field. So this will represent my total student population enrolled, both public and private, from grades nursery through 8th grade. So I'll actually just name this TOT_POP as an abbreviation for total population. And I'll click on my button that has the 2 arrows pointing to the right next to the output fields list box, and that'll add that field into my output fields. So that is the total student population. And so now I will continue, and I'm going to do the same type of operation just for the students enrolled in public school. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to select the male students enrolled by category in public school. So that was pre-KK. So this is total male students enrolled in grades 1 through 4 in public school. And this is total male students enrolled in grades 5 through 8 in public school. And I'll continue to move through my list, and I'll start grabbing the female student enrollment by those same categories. And I'll continue to scroll through my list, being careful that I'm grabbing the appropriate field name. And then again, once I have them all selected, I'll come to my field operators, drop down, and I'll select sum. And for this new field name, I'm going to name it total public. So this represents the total student population enrolled in public school. Again, I'll click on the button to add it to my output fields. And now I'll go through and I'll make the same selection, only this time I'll be selecting students enrolled in private school. So again, I'm carefully proceeding down the list, making sure I'm selecting the appropriate fields. So this is the male students, and now I'm going through the female students. So nursery school, continue to move through the list. I need to select pre-K. Course grades 1 through 4. I'm just double checking here. And finally I'll select grades 5 through 8. Again, I'm going to select the sum operator. I'm going to call this PVT for private. So now I've added fields that calculates the total student population enrolled, both in private and public, and then individually by the total student population enrolled just in public, and then the total student population enrolled in private. But again, I still don't have my percentage breakdown of the student population. So once again, I'm going to go back to my available fields. I'm going to go through and select by category again. In this case, I'm going through and selecting all the different enrollment classifications by public school. And almost there. And more. And now I'll just put an _n on the end of my new field name to represent the normalized value, because what I'm going to do in the normalized by drop down box, I'm actually going to select the total population field that we have calculated already. And you know, actually I made a mistake on my field name. This was supposed to be public, and I have it set to private, so I'm going to select it and click the remove button to remove it from my output fields, rename it appropriately, and then re-add it to the output fields. And so what this is, it takes the total student population enrolled in public schools and normalizes it by the total student population enrolled, period. So essentially this is giving me my percentage of students enrolled in public school. And now I'm going to repeat the same operation, except this time I'm selecting the appropriate fields for the private school enrollment. I'm going to sum these values together again. I'm going to change my field name, and then I still want to normalize by the total student population. I'll click apply. It does the calculations and then asks me, do I wish to add the data to the view? I'm going to say yes. And once again, I see that I have a new layer added to the top of the table of contents. I'm going to remove the old original layer, keeping the new layer. I'm going to turn it on. And now if I use the View Attribute Data tool and click on a parish, I see now the new fields that I calculated. So I have the total student population, which is a little over 5,000 students. Then beneath that, I see what the total student population enrolled in public school is. I see what the total student population enrolled in private. And then beneath that, I get the percentage breakdown. So I see what the percentage of students enrolled in public school and the percentage of students enrolled in private school. So that gives me the data I need for my calculations. So now, for the purpose of this demo, let's assume that there's one parish in particular that I'm interested in. And for this demo, I'm going to select Iberville Parish. And I only want to see that one parish on my map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a filter on my layer by double-clicking on the layer in the table of contents. And I bring up the Layer Properties dialog box. And I see at the bottom of this box, I have a place where I can enter a filter expression. And next to it, there's this Add Expression button. If I click on this, it gives me an opportunity to build an expression. So I see the fields that are available, and I can simply double-click on a field, double-click on the operator, and then I can select the Show Unique Values to see all of the possible values in this layer. I find the value of interest and double-click it. It adds it to my expression, and I simply click Close at this point. And I now have my filtered, and I need to make sure I check the filtered checkbox. It won't actually perform the filter until that is checked. And if I click apply, the map will refresh, and after it is refreshed, I see that the only parish that I had marked as in my filter expression is visible. So with my layer active in my table of contents, I can click on the Zoom to Current Layer tool to zoom the map just to that one parish. So now let's say that I want to do some other things to make the parish boundaries stand out, and maybe even add a chart to show the data that we just calculated. So the first thing I did, I went back to the layer properties by double clicking on it in the table of contents, and I clicked on the legend tab. And on legend type, I'm going to leave it to simple and just double click on the symbol. And in the palette that comes up, I'm going to base a new symbol on this one right here that I'm circling. That's just a black border with a white background. So if I double click on that, I get the Create New Symbol dialog box that pops up. Now I want to change my border, so I'm going to actually go to the Pen Settings tab, and I see I have one pen loaded in my symbol. It's a solid pen, so I'll leave it set to solid now, but I want to make it much thicker. So for the pen width, I'm going to go and I'm going to select 3. No, let's make it even thicker. So I selected 4.5, and I'm going to change its color to red. And I'm even going to change its opacity so it is semi-transparent. So I'll set it to maybe 75% opaque. On my brush settings, my background is set to clear. I want that. I'm going to leave it transparent. Click apply and see how it appears. So I see now I have this nice red border. And maybe I want to make it stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to go back. I'll go back to my layer properties and back to the legend. And I'm going to go back to my pen settings. And I'm going to change the opacity to make it a little more translucent. I'm going to actually add another pen. I'm going to set its width to 1.5. So I've just added another pen to my border, and I changed its setting to a dash dot pen, and it just kind of puts a black kind of a dash dot outline in the middle of that red border there. So now I want to see the statistics that I just calculated for this parish. So I'm going to double click on the layer again to bring up the layer properties, and this time I'm going to go to the chart tab, and I'm going to select a bar chart for the type of chart I want to create. And I'm going to select my normalized public school enrollment field that we had calculated, and I'm going to add it by selecting the field and clicking on the tool with the arrows pointing to the right. And then I also want to do the same thing for the private. Now I want to change the label for these values, so I just double click in the label, and then I just type in what I want for the label for that. So I'm just going to do this as public parentheses %, and I'll do the same thing for the private. So I'll double click in that label and just type over the default that it put in there, which is strictly the field name. I also want to make this chart wider so that I can see the labels at the bottom. So I'm going to change its width. I also am going to change its height. And then I'm also going to give it a 3D effect by changing this 3D %. So I'm just going to make this like a 75. It gives it a nice 3D effect. And then I'll also add a chart legend while I'm at it. I'll place that at the bottom of the chart. So I now have my chart defined, so I'll click apply, and I now see I have this nice chart in the middle of the parish depicting the breakdown in terms of the percentage of students enrolled in public school versus the percentage of students enrolled in private school. Now let's say if I wanted to create a nice output of this, let's say I wanted to either send it to a printer for an actual map output, or I just wanted to copy the graphics out and paste into a PowerPoint presentation or into a Word document or Excel spreadsheet. What I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new map document. I'm going to go to this tool at the very end that was called Publish Map. So I click on that tool, it creates a new map document, and by default I have a dialog box that pops up that asks me to define the page parameters for this new map. So I'm going to leave it set to 8.5 by 11, and I'm also going to set margins around it at 1/4 inch. So if you are actually wanting to print this on a printer, you might need to set some margins around it. And I'll change the orientation to landscape. And I'll go ahead and set grids on this also, which is only visible in this view, but it just allows you to, it gives you guidelines on how to place elements on your map. And as I click apply, I see I have this new empty sheet of paper, and I'm going to go ahead and change my scale to fit view to take up the entire view that I have, and I see the grid dots I have on there. And so my first thing I'm going to do is add a viewport. So the viewport is like a window into the map document, map data view document. So I just simply click and drag to draw a rectangle, and when I release, I get a new dialog box that allows me to specify the properties for this viewport. So the first thing I need to do is select the map data view that it's going to be linked to. I only have one in my project, so that's the only map data view in the drop-down box. And I simply click apply, and I see that it now places that map in my map document here in this viewport. So I notice it doesn't quite fill up. In other words, I got a little bit of space around the parish boundaries. I could have zoomed in a little bit more. A new feature in version 9 of Simple GIS Client is this Viewport Navigation. If I turn that on, it allows me to actually pan or zoom inside the viewport. So otherwise, if that's off, when I pan or zoom, I'm actually just moving the page around. So as you see, I'm just zooming in and out on the page, or I'm panning on the page. What the viewport navigation allows me to do is, if I turn that on, when my cursor is inside the viewport, I can actually pan and zoom on the map to get the exact area that I want visible in my viewport. And I can also use the mouse wheel while I'm inside that viewport window, as long as my cursor is inside that window, and it will pan and zoom on the map. You can also use the pan tool in the same way. So this just allows you to fine-tune the area that you want visible on your actual map output. So this is starting to look pretty close, so I'll turn off the viewport navigation. Now maybe the next thing I want to add is some other map elements. So I'll go ahead and add a map legend. So what I'll do is I'll simply click and drag to draw a rectangle, and again when I release, I get a new dialog box. And the first thing I need to do is select the viewport that this legend is linked to. I only have one on this map document, so that's the only one on my list. I'll select auto calculate column, so that just means I'm going to let it size the legend to fill up or make the most use of the space I drew in the rectangle. And maybe I'll add a north arrow, so I'll select the north arrow tool. In this case, it's just simply a point that I click on the map, and when I do, I get a dialog box. Again, I link to the viewport, and it adds the north arrow where I clicked. Likewise, I could add a scale bar. Again, that is just a point and click, and when I do, I get a new dialog box. In this case, I want an actual scale bar. I want 2 divisions and 1 subdivision. Select the viewport it's linked to and the units that I want the scale to be reported in. And then it places a scale bar on the map. And then finally, if I just wanted to add some text to my map. So maybe I just want to add a text box, so I'll just select the Draw Text tool, click where I want the text to appear, and in the dialog box that appears, I type in the text that I want. So this will be Iberville Parish student population, and I want to align the text using a center alignment and click Apply. Then I'm going to use the Select Graphics tool, which is this red arrow here in the corner, and with the handle selected around my text box, I'm just going to click and drag to move it where I want it on the map. So now I have a nice map that I can output. I could print it, or if I wanted to export it to the graphics, I could go to the map menu and select export, and it would allow me to export this out as a JPEG or bitmap and insert it to PowerPoint or Excel or what have you. So anyhow, that concludes this demo. I hope this was useful, and if you have any other questions or want to see any other tutorials, please visit simplegissoftware.com.